fracking is, so everyone knows.
So just so you know, my name's Matt Jones. I represent Louisville, Lafayette, Longmont, which passed no fracking in Longmont city limits by 60% of the vote, bigger than any of the rest of us got in that town, vote-wise. And Boulder County side of Erie, which is feeling this whole issue very firsthand. Fracking has been going on a long time, actually. People don't know that, but what's different is they now can horizontally drill and frack. So they can, in the West Slope, they're going down and out 2 miles sideways. And then once they get done drilling, they bring in a whole different set of equipment, a bunch of water. They squirt down the hole under high pressure, a lot of water after they have set off charges that fracture shale. You guys know what shale is? It's a pretty impermeable rock, but it's softer. So if they set off a charge, it do cracks, and then they'll send in a bunch of water, some chemicals, and sand to keep those fractures open. They get a lot more money, gas out that way. But they've been vertically fracking for a while, like 30, 40 years. But people, that's not kind of the current debate. It has made it extremely lucrative. There's $3.6 billion being invested in Colorado by Noble and Anadarko in the next year. A well, as I understand it, you drill a well, you'll spend about $3 or $4 million, and you'll make $10 million on the thing. Your work cost. I mean, it's a good return on investment. It's better than my money market. I try to tell jokes. People go, huh? Do I, Dennis?
He's a very good joke teller, normally.
Yeah, I don't know. If I don't know Dennis was here, I don't know if I'd have come. But, 5 years ago, I ran for the State House as a young man with reddish brown hair. Dennis came over and helped me kick it off.
Right.
That's how far back it goes. And he ran the auction. I would be eternally grateful to you.
I'm honored to have gotten you on your start. You're blossoming beautifully, isn't he?
So anyway, I could just answer questions. Let me give you a quick rundown of bills this year. And there's so much going on in the last 30 days. This is the busiest session I've been in the legislature 8 years. This is my 9th. 6 years in the late 80s, early 90s, and I came back for a repeat sentence 3 years ago now. And I have never seen so many big things happen. Just boom, 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 boom. This afternoon I voted on a renewable energy standard for REAs up to 25%. You know, it's just like that all the time. So anyway, I'm running an inspection bill, Senate Bill 202. By the way, I do renewable energy bills too. I did a PACE bill where businesses can finance energy improvements and renewable energy improvements on a voluntary basis by joining a bond, basically. So I do that kind of stuff too, and this is the stuff I like to say that's where we should be going. And then I work on oil and gas to say how we should do it responsibly and accountably. So I'm running a bill that would, right now, wells are inspected every 4 years on average. And I ran a bill to do it to 1 year and also to make them look more thoroughly. In Longmont, we had a well by a middle school, 350 feet from the middle school. And they found benzene in the groundwater almost 100 times the state standard. Benzene is a carcinogen, causes leukemia, bone marrow depression, respiratory problems, endocrine problems, 100 times. And it was only found because the developer wanted to develop the property and they checked. Been inspected twice, at least. Not good found. So they need to do a more thorough job. Then the city of Longmont went and inspected the rest of their wells, and the next 2 they inspected both were above limits. One was 300 times the state standard for benzene. And the other wasn't into the groundwater yet, but it was also contaminated above state standards. So they're not inspected very well. You might have been reading about Parachute. They don't know how long everything's going. It's expensive to go drill a hole, but I mean, what I'm trying to do is get them to say, based on what we know and the infractions we have, we're going to go look there first for the more expensive stuff, and then we're going to characterize the problem and then come back and incorporate that. We actually have added, between the House putting on an amendment and me working with the JPC beforehand, we've got it down to 1 every 2 years, enough inspectors, and we have to hold that in the budget. So that's where that is. And so I'm going to pull that part of my bill out and just do the risk-based stuff, the inspections, the more deep inspection stuff in my bill. And the House side, do you guys know how to pass a bill? How many votes do you need? 33 in the House. 18 in the Senate, so I went to the Senate, and I like counting 33, it's too big. And then 1. So what do I got to do? Got to get the governor's signature, right? So this is a challenge, and we're going to be working with the governor to see if we can't come up with something. But we're creating a lot of back pressure is what we're doing right now. Mike Foote, who is in the seat I used to represent in the last 2 years, represents Lafayette, Longmont, and Louisville. Did a couple bills so far. That's what's so fun. Being in the majority, you can do late bills. I don't know what I'm doing, Dennis. I don't know what I'm doing.
I never
It's a late
served
bill.
in the majority.
I have 6 bills this year, and 4 of them were late. My mom probably wouldn't approve because I'm late all the time. It's really cool. So he introduced a bill to increase fines. Right now, you can be fined $1,000 per day per violation, up to $10,000 unless there's some more mitigating, worse, it's a major environmental issue or you're wasting too much gas, which is crazy to me that those are even. That's up to 16 grand. The fines they've been handing out for most times are like parking tickets to folks. And so what we did, I'm the Senate sponsor of that bill. That bill takes it to what the Colorado Department of Health can fund, which is 15 grand per violation per day, up to. And then we put some minimums at 5,000, and there's a big fight over that right now, what the minimum should be. And then the bill they're debating right now is House Bill 1269, which is has to do with conflict of interest. For me, the fundamental problem with oil and gas in Colorado is you have an agency that's charged with promoting and regulating. And it's really hard to do that, right? And they make conflicting decisions, I think. And I think they promote too much and not regulate enough. And so what this bill says is that public health, safety, and welfare, and environment first, and getting out the product is here, not here. And so that's what they're debating now. That's the bill the industry is more concerned about. We had more lobbyists lobbying against this bill than we had inspectors in the state. You counted 23 one day. And then there's 2 environmental lobbyists that are running from here to there. And they have so many things going on. So that bill's into play. There's one that said you had to disclose when you sold a house that Representative Moreno did, or is doing. There are a couple health study ones by Representative Janal from Fort Collins. Her background is, and she's a PhD endocrinologist, so she gets the physical part of this better than the rest of us. But she's doing a couple bills, and there are more to come. We're building pressure. Hopefully we'll get something big, more than a few more inspectors and a little higher funds. So that's kind of what's going on in the State House now.
Senator, can I ask you to comment on what's been going on with the city of Longmont banning fracking in their community, and the governor's office suing Longmont for that. And at Common Cause, we care about democracy and self-governance. And so can you talk a little bit about what that means when the governor is able to come in after a community votes to ban fracking?
Sure. I think my mom, Dennis, did my mom used to come to these things, you remember?
Yeah, she did.
My mom was real active in AARP and social justice stuff, and she had her 85th birthday last week, 2 weeks ago. So anyway, when I was sitting in this room, it kind of flashed back, because she used to be my intern.
What was her maiden name?
Betty Jones? But
What
she
was
took
her
on the
family?
Welsh name, you know?
I know, yeah. But you're Celt under the kills there.
Her maiden name is Childers, which is, I think, I don't know what it is. Anyway, sorry, I diverged. This is confusing, so you ready? Longmont had these incidences go on that I told you about with the groundwater, and everybody in town's like, these guys aren't doing their job. So the city council, bipartisan city council, and if you don't know, Longmont is purple as far as between red and blue politically. probably 100 more Democrats now than there used to than Republicans. And it used to be a lot different, believe me, a lot more red. But in any case, it's kind of right in between. And so people started getting alarmed. The first phone call I got was from a Republican from western Nebraska, right? It plays out partisan in the chambers, but in the legislature, but it is not out in the field, believe me. So these people were never been involved in environmental causes, afraid for their kids, 350 feet from middle school, 100 times the state standard, kids are out playing on the equipment. And so they got really energized and they pushed the council. And then there was, the governor appointed an interim committee on what was it? I can't remember right now. Local control was, yeah. And one of the Republican council members, now it's a nonpartisan body, but we all know who's Democrats and Republicans, got appointed to that. He became a true believer of the environmental side after doing that. It was interesting to watch him kind of morph over to that. And so they worked hard to look at the current law, the current court decisions, which restrict governments some, not which the Attorney General or even the governor would tell you. And they crafted a solution they thought that worked real well. In the meantime, they worked with the driller, it's a smaller driller named Top Drilling, and they came to an agreement. They said, we will not protest your ordinance because we got what we want. We can drill in a way that works for you. So they did that. They're hitting each other on the back, right? And then the state sued them, not the oil industry, with all this money, the state. And there was quite a bit of pushback by a lot of people, including myself, like, the oil industry is perfectly capable of fighting these legal fights. I don't want my taxpayer money, which is actually not taxpayer money, by the way. It's a property tax on oil is paying for that. So there was a lot of pushback then. And then this kind of was boiling up. And the ordinance for a lot of people in town wasn't enough, which was a really aggressive ordinance, enough to get sued. Commerce City did about the same ordinance, didn't get sued. Don't ask me why. Anyway, it's pushing and pushing, and then the state sued. And in the meantime, people were putting this on a ballot. They were putting a frack ban, a total ban of fracking underneath the city lines, city boundaries. Complete ban. They got it on there. State sued. I think they probably improved the numbers on that 5 percentage points. 60% of the people in that town voted for a total ban. In part because they were like sending a message. I was asked, would you have signed a petition? I said, I did sign the petition. And they said, why? And I said, because somebody's got to send a message, right? So that happened. Then the state fortunately didn't sue on that one, but the oil company did. The Oil and Gas, Colorado Oil and Gas Association did, and then they brought Top Drilling into that suit. That was going to have a harder time of being sustained. The ordinance, though, I give it a 50-50 chance because these decisions are made based on the fact circumstances in the place of the local government. And what's changed since the Greeley decision 20 years ago, it's one of my hometowns, Greeley West, when we graduated high school. My parents got fracked in here 2 years ago. What's changed since that decision is they're drilling like this, or this, but they weren't doing this. Now they can reach out. And so the fact circumstances have changed in those court cases, where they get easier access to their mineral right. And so I think that one has a lot better chance of remaining largely intact. The ban, it's a takings issue. You're taking, the oil and gas guys said it was $500 million. Then we found out that 80% of it was owned by the city. So they're suing the city to get it so the city can exploit a resource it doesn't want to exploit. Anyway, it's pretty bizarre. But that's Longmont story. And then Erie, you don't hear much about it, but those are the people with the wells right by their houses with the burners.
With the what?
Burners. So they take the stuff out, take it out. They can't capture all the methane, for instance, which is greenhouse gas. So they send it to a burner and they burn it off so that it doesn't emit methane, but other things. People are nearby this stuff. Some people are 50 feet away from their houses. And part of it's the problem is the cities grow towards the wells as well as wells coming to the city. So when you hear the local government argument, it cuts two ways. In Boulder County, where I live, we would love to have more local control. In Well County, where I used to live, I don't want it. Sorry, that's the line, sorry.
Great,
Anyway, sorry.
thanks. Do you want
We were talking about this issue back at the office where we work on poverty and economic security. And of course, we don't know anything about the issue, but we were wondering, sometimes you hear the term like environmental justice, where pollution and environmental degradation is more common in low-income areas. And so we were debating whether or not fracking by its nature just takes place where it is, or is there an overlay related to low-income neighborhoods versus other income levels? Or is it just kind of it's happening where the wells are, and do you know what I'm asking? Okay.
So, first of all, go ahead and get involved. But the second part is wherever the resource is. I mean, where they started, this whole thing started in Longmont, is the most Republican part of town with some of the biggest houses. And so they don't care, because it's the middle interest there, and they're going to make a lot of money. And you know, now the setback's going to 500 feet with 4 exemptions. It was 300 feet with like 2 exemptions before. And so to see Colorado or the Gas Conservation Commission, to see GCC is patting themselves on the back for a job well done, it's like they're frog. You know, all that work. And we have 4 exceptions that kind of swallow the rule. And so that's why people like me push back. We see this go down, and they don't really make they're really good at advertising about it, but they don't go far, you know, they don't go enough to protect people's health and the environment.
Yeah.
I would just say, hi, Becky Lone with Conservation Colorado, and I'm very sorry to be so late. The house just adjourned, and I was there having fun. The other thing I would add is, a lot of conversation gets drawn to the term fracking, which is an important part of the process of extracting oil and gas in Colorado. But when we talk about the impacts from oil and gas, there's actually a broad range of issues that happen, and fracking is a term associated with a technology. And so when you look at the full scale of development and you have issues like flaring and venting that were mentioned here near schools and homes, now we're talking about air quality, and that is an issue that regardless of where it occurs, also travels. And so we know that in Colorado we have air quality issues because you were all familiar with the term brown cloud. Similar issues arise out of oil and gas development. And then it's also things like dust and noise and traffic and a heavy industrial activity taking place in neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods can occur anywhere. And they may be low income, they may be medium, they may be high income, as we've seen in Longmont. So there's a whole mix of things that can happen, from like where the surface use occurs, where the actual well is drilled, to what is impacted by that drilling, which can be air quality, water quality, both surface water and groundwater quality, and a whole other variety of issues. And unfortunately, it doesn't pick an area, right? We're all stuck in this issue together, which is why I think it's really important that regardless of interest groups or base that we're really representing, it's important to have more folks involved, because unfortunately, in areas where there's wealthier development, while there may be a property value impact to someone, they could decide to move and they may have the resources to do that, whereas low-income communities would have a very hard time finding another area to move to.
I'm not very familiar with mineral rights, but in your example of it goes down and then 2 miles that way, does the gas company need to own the mineral rights of 2 miles down? And can they buy the rights without, are the mineral rights separate from the property rights? Can you do a basic?
Yeah, lawyers have a fancy term for it. It's called split estate. And you can carve off all those mineral rights, and it's not just the gas. It can be the alluvial, like sand and gravel, coal, molybdenum.
So if I buy a house and I bought the property, does the mineral rights come with that, or could the gas company say, I want to buy the mineral rights after you've purchased the house?
Not unless you explicitly purchase the mineral rights at point of purchase when you buy property. Do you own both the surface and mineral rights? And typically, those rights have been severed, often since the 1800s, when Colorado was a U.S. territory, and those rights were severed. So there's a lot of mineral rights that are owned by the federal government in Colorado, and they are leased to oil and gas companies to extract. There's some owned by the state of Colorado, and they are leased for extraction, and there's some that are owned by private property mineral rights owners and royalty owners. But you do not necessarily own them, and unless it's stated very clearly in your documents, when you purchase a home or land, you don't own them.
Does it need to be stated that you do not own them?
It typically is stated that you do not own them. But unless you are having a separate purchase of mineral rights as part of your property purchase, you don't own them.
I understand that one of the biggest issues around fracking is water, and it takes so much water to do this, and we don't have water. So how are they dealing with the water issues?
They buy it wherever they can, a lot of times from cities. And the industry will tell you it's less than 1% of the state's water. Well, that's a lot of gallons. And it's, what, 500,000 gallons every well?
Roughly.
So they go into the Erie and they do 8 holes. It's 4 million gallons of water. And a lot of times they were buying it from Longmont. Really sells a lot of water. You know, I can't tell you all the places, but you know, it's easiest to get water if you back up to a hydrant instead of pumping it yourself. I have a confession to make. When I was a young man in college, I was up in Gillette, Wyoming, hauling water in the oil patch, as we called it, and quite the experience. But we pumped it out of. There wasn't any of that infrastructure. We were out in the prairie. But most of the time, I understand it's from cities to the solid fuel.
Can totally range from cities to a well. On the western slope, they sometimes pump it directly out of the river. Doesn't happen as much on the Front Range because the South Platte is so over-appropriated with other water users, but it can come from a variety of places. Typically, once it's used, it's gone from the system forever, whereas if you and I use water in our homes, we brush our teeth, we flush the toilet, a big chunk of that water is reclaimed after it goes through the water treatment facility process. With this water that is, you know, once it's gone down hole and been used for fracking, it may be used multiple times in that process, but it's never going to come back to the system because it's degraded so severely.
So we've touched a little bit on the health and environmental impacts, but we haven't dug in a whole lot. Becky, can you talk a little bit about what you know about those impacts?
Sure. I mean, what we know and what we don't know are a big part of the issue related to oil and gas activity in Colorado. The mix of chemicals that can be used in the fracking process can vary. We do have disclosure agreements in Colorado that have helped. They're a good step forward in knowing what's going down the holes and what's not. So that if workers are exposed to it, people in the area, if there's a spill, doctors know how to treat it. There's still a lot of secrecy around what is actually in different frac fluids. So recently there was a big stir over the governor drinking frac fluid. There is a new technology called CleanStem, a new product which is made from food-sourced products. It is not used in Colorado. There's a great ProPublica article from last year that talks about the types of frac fluids that are used in Colorado, and they can range with everything from like baking soda and sand and water to benzene and diesel fuel and a whole bunch of other things that you don't want in your system. We also know of folks who've been exposed to these and have multi-year lingering impacts from these issues. Often they can't come speak on record because their medical bills were so high and so severe that industry pays their medical bills and they've signed a non-disclosure agreement. So that's happened in several instances, which is really tricky. The things we don't know as much about are what happens from air quality, what happens from the particulate issues and things happening both during the drilling process and later. And we need more information on that front. Representative Joanne Janal has a bill in committee this week doing a health impact study on these issues and looking at what those issues are in a really great scientific format. It's House Bill 1275, if folks want to look at it further. Because we just don't know. So it's the things like when we're flaring these different gases, if there's a spill, what are the risks? What do those potentially cause? How many, what's the concentration of that chemical? What's the exposure rate? how sick will that make people or not. But we know there's a range of issues that can come from being exposed to these different chemicals. I've talked to friends who work in reproductive right issues, and there's major concerns about what happens to your reproductive health systems if you're exposed to things like benzene and some of these other contaminants, which can make people sterile, in addition to cancer-causing issues and all sorts of stuff. So the short version is, it's not good. You don't want to be around this stuff. The bigger question is figuring out how much people are around it and where they're around it, and how do we prevent that and pass the strongest rules for public health and safety here in Colorado.
Where are we relative to other states?
In terms of,
How much we regulate, don't regulate? I mean, is there a certain state that is like a model of good or not, or
We like to say we are.
the model of
I
good?
think if I were to give us a grade, I'd give us a C+. Interestingly, North Dakota is going crazy, right? But they inspect their wells twice a year,
Every well.
every well. Yeah, and they're wanting to get 4 times a year. In my personal opinion, that's probably overkill. I mean, you have problems, you gotta go look for problems, you don't go look for, something that works fine. We have pretty good disclosure, groundwater disclosure rules. We say they're the best in the nation, what's pumped into the ground. You could make an argument that Wyoming's are stronger than ours, because they not only ask for it after the fact, they ask for it before you pump it in the ground. Although you can't get access to it, that's the difference. In Colorado, you can go on Frack Focus, this website that's sponsored by the industry, not the state, interestingly, and you can figure out what they pump down the hole. And you can see all the compounds, but I don't, it's hard to tell what that means if you're a layperson like myself. I did that in Erie as kind of an exercise. I went to one set of holes and kind of looked up what they were doing. Setbacks, we say we're pretty good at 500 feet. Well, in Texas, in the middle of the gas patch, local governments have control, and they can set the setbacks where they want. And many of them are 1,000 feet, and some are 2,000 feet, some are 250.
Can you explain what setback is?
So a setback is the setback from where a well is and where your home is. Or you're building, any kind of building, it's setting it back from there. And I'm told by the state staff that includes the equipment, but I'm not so sure. When you go and look at Erie's situation, you'll see the hole, and then you'll see the treater, burning it and all that stuff here. And the treaters are a big problem, because what happens is it comes up under high pressure and hits this low pressure place. That's where they have a lot of air problems they have. There is technology that can make it a lot better. There was a study done by NOAA out of Boulder, the scientists out of Boulder, that found that in the Wattenberg field, which is the field north of us here and east of us, that 4% of the methane is lost to the atmosphere. Now, methane is a real bad greenhouse gas. And here's the kicker: if it's over 3.2%, they think gas in its life cycle is dirtier than coal. And so this is in dispute now. They said, well, it doesn't have the signature of the gas wells. No one back said yes, it does have the signature of gas wells, so it's evolving. But all that, what you've learned about coal, gas being cleaner, it's true when it's burned. But when you look at life cycle, it may not be true.
where we are really absolutely depends on which state we're talking about. There's some of our neighbor states who are behind us. There's some who are ahead of us. There's also states who are seeing rapid development in a way that, we never thought of Pennsylvania and New York as the gas patch. And they are now. They're scrambling to do a lot of different things. Pennsylvania has a standard called presumptive liability, which means before you can go and drill, you have to be able to prove that if there's any water quality damage, you didn't cause that. And that's important because you and I and citizens don't have the resources to conduct our own groundwater monitoring program, and we shouldn't have to, right? We're not causing that impact. And so that's a real equity issue for someone trying to prove what happened. There was a case in 2007, a guy named Ned Prater, who lives outside of Rifle, drove up to his hunting cabin, poured a glass of water. It was a hot, dry day, drank 2/3 of the glass, realized something was really wrong. Had a lot of chemicals in it. There had been a problem with his spring and a contamination from nearby operations. It took 2 years to find out which company was involved and responsible. And there was about 5 companies drilling in the area, so it took a very long time to figure it out. We don't know now who ultimately figured it out, other than kind of looking through the fines and figuring out who got assessed because of confidentiality agreements and other things that happened. He's someone who has his health impacts covered by, but has had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So it's hard to figure out where we are in some cases, but a presumptive liability standard like what we see in other states would have helped prove who caused that issue. So it puts the burden of proof on industry to really show that they're not causing those problems. And if they don't believe they're going to cause them, they don't actually have to do any monitoring whatsoever. On the setbacks issue, prior to 2007, when we said, hey, maybe we should update this and look at something, the former setback was far enough away from a home that if a drill rig falls over, it won't land on the home. That's it. Not great. So that has been improved, but now we're still not talking about the noise, the dust, the light, what's being off-gassed, what happens if there's a spill, what happens if there's a blowout, if there's a fire, what about all of these things, which are really local land use decisions, right? If they were citing a gravel pit in the middle of your neighborhood, your local government would have a big say in this. Here in Colorado, that's, many would argue, including myself, that local governments do have a lot of that authority, but there is a legal wrestling match happening around whether or not they do. And industry and the governor say, no, the state gets to decide those things. But there's an active and fiery conversation happening about what that should be, because those are local issues, and the state isn't the planning and zoning committee of communities. And I don't think they actually want to be, but in this instance, they're absolutely the planning and zoning committee in their view. So it's a real issue, and the setback issue is still revolving. We have new rules that were just passed that puts that at 500 feet, but there's a lot of exemptions where that could